Hello and welcome along to another video on the flat pulley assembly series. So in this video I'm going to create a new drawing sheet, within the same drawing file. This time I'm going to do a single one of the parts here. So let's say, for example, the pulley base, if we take them in order. So down at the bottom here I'm going to click on create a new sheet. Okay, it opens up a new blank sheet with the same format and same properties as sheet 1. So it'll take whatever the properties you set up for sheet 1 and create a new copy of that essentially. So if we right click here, we can look at the sheet properties. See, it's using the same template as before, and it's still in first angle projection because we set that last time. Okay, so in this sheet here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to import three views of a particular part. So if I go back to the drawing tab back here, same basic procedure that we used before. I can import a model view of an existing part, so the pulley base, spindle, wheel or bracket, and I can import a single view and then project views from that. Or alternatively, I could come across here to the right hand side and go to View Palette. I need to refresh that. And here it's still looking at the same model, the assembly model that I had before, so I can change that. This little drop down here, I can go to Pulley Base, for example. And we have my front view, top view, right view, etc. So I could drag from that, drag a particular view from that onto the sheet and project from there. Okay. But I'm just going to cancel out of that for the moment. I'm going to, if I go to the, here, so on the drawing tab here, if I go to the standard 3 view, that should take, depending on how I've created my model, that should give me a plan, elevation and end view of my part. So standard 3 view of that part, and click OK, and it's put in a plan, elevation and end view of that pulley part in first angle projection. So this is the front elevation, and looking from above we see the plan below. Okay, so I'm going to select the parent view, so the front elevation in this case, and change the display style of that to hidden lines visible. You see these holes now appear in this view, but also in this view here as well, because this is a child view of the first one. Okay, so you can rearrange those views as needed then. If you move the parent view, the other views move with it. If you move one of the child views, they just move independently. Okay, so those are the 3 views that I want. A couple of different methods, as I say. You could use the standard 3 view, depending on how you've modeled it in your when you're modeling the part. It'll essentially take what's on the front plane as being the front elevation. So for the bracket part, for example, I modeled the bracket part on the right plane. So this, using the standard 3 view method wouldn't really work for me in that case. Okay, so if you're happy enough with the views as they've put in, it puts in plan, elevation, and view. Solidworks will generally put in center marks for you on holes. Now it may not always put in a center mark. Let's say if you just have a fillet and you want to have a center mark or a curve and you want to have a center mark for the curve, it may not always put them in. So you can put in a center mark on any curve or on any circle or any hole. You can manually put that in on the annotation tab over here. So we'll do that next. This is generally what I would do, is put in my views, and then I'd look to see is there any center lines or center marks that are missing from those views, and then add them in that way. So if I go to the annotation tab. I could put in a center mark here if it was missing from a curve, or I could put in a center line if it's missing from a hole. So let's say if I wanted to put in a center line here on these holes, what you do is click on the center line, and then you select the two edges. So this edge, and it will place, it should place, yeah, there we go, it'll place the center line down through those, and extending a little bit beyond them as well, as you can see there. And it has actually placed them on this view for me as well. Okay, so those are the center lines there. Now depending, you may want to have a center line down through the middle of the part as well to indicate symmetry. I'll maybe look at that again after I've put in the dimensions. Okay, so having my three views, I've done my center lines and center marks. The next thing I want to look at is dimensioning. Okay, so again on the annotation tab up here, we saw in the previous video you can use the Smart Dimension tool to manually add in dimensions. You can do that to manually add dimensions, but in many cases you're better off to use the model items. So the model items, what it does is it'll pull the dimensions to place in your 2D drawing. It'll pull the dimensions from your 3D model. So if I go back to the Pulley base part here, my 3D model of that part. Okay, if I click on that, it should show me, say for this feature, so this boss here on the top of the part, if I click on that boss, it'll show me the dimensions that went into creating that feature. So this 50 millimeters, the 110, the 60, and the 5 up from that surface. Where it's drawn those dimensions from, if I look at, so this boss extrude 2, it's drawn its dimensions from sketch 3. If I click on one of these holes, for example here, the dimensions that went into generating that hole are the 40 center to center, 20 out from this shoulder or step here, and the diameter 8 on the hole itself, and also the 10, which is the depth of that feature, or the depth of that body that it's cutting through. Okay, so each one of these features in your model has a certain set of dimensions associated with it. If I click on a fillet over here, for example, it just gives me the radius, and that's kind of it for this fairly simple part. Okay, so having said that, if we go back now and we look at our 2D drawing, just cancel that and go back and look at the 2D drawing. Okay, so bearing in mind that the geometry that it's drawing this 2D drawing from has a set of dimensions associated with it, that's what the model items here refers to. So if I click on model items, what it'll allow you to do is to import those dimensions from your 2D model directly onto from your 3D model directly into your 2D drawing. And you can do that feature by feature, or you can do it for the entire model. Okay, now what I would recommend is that you do it feature by feature. So I'll do this once for the entire model just to show you. It'll put in every dimension that was used in your 3D part file. It'll put them all in at once. And sometimes that works out okay. For a more complex part, it can get quite messy. So what I would do, I'm going to undo that. What I would typically recommend that you do is you do your model items and do them feature by feature. So click on selected feature. If you want to specify that the dimensions go into this elevation here rather than the plan, you can uncheck the box for import items into all views, or you can leave that checked if you want. So if I, let's say, want to import the dimensions that went into making this 50 millimeter boss here, if I click on that feature, see here it puts in 50 millimeters, 5 millimeters height for it. and also the 60 and the 110. Now you can see it's put those into two different views. So it's put the 110 into my elevation and the 60 into my plan. I might prefer to have the 110 here on the plan, for example. So if I cancel that, if I go into model items again, and let's say I'll do selected feature, and I uncheck the box for import items into all views. So let's say if I select the this line here, see it's put all those dimensions just into this plan view here. Okay. Now, okay. Now if I click on this up here, yeah. So you can manually delete an individual dimension if you want to. And if I go into manual or model items again, and so I click on this line up here, now I can get the 50 millimeters up here and have the 110 millimeters down here. So you can play around with it a little bit, experiment with this import items into all views command, and manually try and force it to put particular dimensions into particular views. It'll take a little bit of trial and error sometimes. Okay, so that's the 50 millimeters, and then also the overall dimensions of the plan of it, the 110 by 60. Okay. Once the dimensions are in, you can drag them around, resize them, move them into a suitable location. Okay, so we have the dimensions in for the main geometry. We don't have any dimensions for the holes yet. So if I go to model items again, and I go to import the dimensions for these holes. So I'm just going to click on the entire model and just click OK. You can see it hasn't actually imported any dimensions for the holes. It has put in this dimension here for the fillet radius, for example. But if I go to model items and import, it hasn't automatically picked up these dimensions that went into creating these holes. And the reason for that is that if I go back and look at my model here, just cancel out of this tab first, and I'll go back and look at the model. The way I created those holes in the model was using the hole wizard. Okay, so you can see this feature here in my feature tree is the hole wizard. And the way the hole wizard creates those holes is you create a sketch within the hole wizard dialog, and essentially what it does is it places in 4 points, or however many points, to represent the center of those holes. See these blue points here. Creates one sketch for those locations for the holes, and a separate sketch then for the profile of the hole. In this case they're just plain holes, so it just creates a revolved cut feature, and that's the profile of the revolved cut. Okay, so that's sketch 4 and sketch 5 there are the location of the holes and the profile of the holes. So if I go back to my drawing view now, if you just use the standard, or just use the model items to import dimensions into that view, by default it only imports the these features, the extrude features and extruded cuts, that kind of thing. It hasn't actually imported the information for the hole wizard holes. So you'll see here on the next section down in the model items dialog here, we have a few options here. We have one here for hole wizard profiles and one here for hole wizard locations. So the hole wizard locations here would be those 4 points at the center of those holes. So that's what we need to import, is the dimensions to the center points of those 4 holes. So I should be able to import. There we go. I should be able to import the information relating to the location of those holes. Okay. And I think that is more or less all of the information we need for that. We have the overall height of this boss plus the 5 millimeters for this one, and that I think that is more or less it for the dimensions. Now the fillet radius here, you see there's only one of the fillets dimensioned. Excuse me, I cancelled out of that without keeping those dimensions. So yeah, so I think dimension-wise that's more or less it. You could tidy them up a little bit more, but the video is getting on a bit. I wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at this title block down here as well. So the title block here within SolidWorks, this is on. You could think of it as being like a separate layer in your drawing. So the borders and the title block and any of the text populating the title block are saved within what's known as the sheet format. So to access that sheet format, you can right click somewhere on the drawing background, or you can right click on the sheet information over here, or I believe down here as well. And in any of those locations, just click on edit sheet format. Your drawing disappears temporarily. It is still there in the background, but you're essentially now operating on a different layer of your drawing file. You can edit your title blocks, your borders, and also then the text that goes in here. So when you're within the sheet format, you have access to modify the text boxes, or the text that goes into these here. So you can modify the let's say where it says title here. If you double click on that word title, you can modify that and change it to drawing name or something like that. Okay, but also then there's a hidden text box here. So if you click on that text box, you can see the properties for it on the left hand side, and if you double click on it, you can get in and you can manually change the text in there, type in something that you want. Okay, that same goes for most of these over here. If we look at the drawn by section here, if you click in the center of that box, there is an invisible text box in there, and you'll see if you hover over it, if you hover your mouse over that, you see this $sign PRP drawn by. What that's saying is that this text box here will be automatically populated by a property. So the $sign PRP means there's a property called drawn by that will automatically fill in that text box. So some of these text boxes here are linked to a property in the background of your drawing. I think this title one, yeah, if I hover over that, you see that's linked to a property called description. This drawing number here, that has been automatically filled in, that's linked to the file name. Now that's the file name of the drawing file here. So you see flat pulley assembly sheet 2. That's flat pulley assembly is the file name of the 2D drawing file, not the model that goes into it. Some of these other ones here, so the sheet 2 of 2, that's again linked to a property. The scale here is linked to a property, and so on. Now you can manually link something to a particular property if you want to, or you can create your own properties if you want to. But let's say if this title here is linked to a property called description, drawn, this box here under name is linked to a property called drawn by. So what we can do is we can modify the properties, or modify the drawn by property to put your name into it, for example, and that will automatically put your name into that box then. So where you find a lot of these properties is if you go up to the top here, go to File, and go to Property. So these are your document properties. You see here you have the Summary tab and a Custom tab. So in Summary tab you have the author, keywords, comments, title, and subject. In the Custom tab over here then you can either create a new property. Let's say if you wanted to create a new property called, for example, student number. Okay, and you could give that a value then. The value for the property student number would be A00123455 or whatever your student number is. So you can create a new property that way. Or the other thing that you can do is you can modify an existing property. So let's say we have an existing property called drawn by. Okay, and the value for drawn by, we can give that a value of your name. Okay, so if I click OK on that now, you'll see that because I've modified the property drawn by to be my name, any text box that's linked to the property, that's linked to the property drawn by will change to E. McIntyre. I could do something similar. Let's say if instead of checked here, I could put in my student number. So let's say if I double click into this check text box here, and I'll just change that to number. Okay, so there's a text box in here, and I'm going to link that to the property that I've created already. So with that text box selected, over here on the left hand side you see we have hyperlink and link to property. So link to property is the one I want here. So I can link the contents of that text box to a property called student number. So that's the one I just created there. And you see that gets populated then with A00123455. I could probably do something similar here where I link this to the property of the file name of the model or something like that. But for something like this where we have maybe 3 or 4 sheets or 4 or 5 sheets or whatever it is, it'd probably be as easy just to type that in myself. So I'm going to type just Pulley base in here. Okay, so when you're done, then when you've modified the title block to your liking, go up here to the top right hand side to accept the changes to that, and that you should get back then to your drawn view with your parts and your dimensions and so on. Okay, so I think that video has gone on long enough. I'm going to leave it at that now, but you continue that process then. So you have your assembly view with your section, and then a separate sheet then for each one of the individual components. Now one other last thing then that I want to just talk about before I wrap up the video is saving this. So you can save this then as a drawing file, SLDDRW file. The other thing that you can do though is to export a PDF of that. So if you go to Save As, I think. If you go to Save As and you go to change the file type, Save As type, you can save that as a PDF file. and it should save it as a multi-page PDF file. Not sure where I saved that to. Oh yeah, sorry. So PDF export here, it asks you then. So let's say you have 5 sheets or 6 sheets or whatever it is in your drawing file. It'll ask you to select which one of those sheets, or if you want multiple sheets, you can highlight multiple here, and it'll create a multi-page PDF then with all of those sheets in it. Okay, so when you're done, you have all of these here, all your sheets and all your part files done. Save a copy of your drawing file, but also save a PDF of a multi-page PDF of all of them together. Okay, I'll finish up the video at that then.